Hi guys, my name is Shirag Shemmassian and I'm an MCAT tutor at Shemmassian Academic Consulting. Today I'll be walking through a CARS passage that should take you about 9 minutes usually on the exam, but since I'll be walking and talking through it, I'll be taking a little bit longer. Thank you so much for joining me, and let's get started. Alright, so first I want to explain this blue background that I have in the back. I put it there to remind ourselves that anytime that we do MCAT practice, we want to make sure that we are in the zone. We are simulating test conditions. We're going to an environment that is completely quiet with no distractions to make sure that when we do our practice, we are doing it exactly like how we would do it when we're taking the exam. So that way, when you do go in for exam day and you're doing the real thing, it feels just like all the practice questions and sessions that you've done. There's no surprises, nothing is different, and you can put your full focus and energy into doing the best on the exam. So that's always my first suggestion, is that you want to simulate test conditions and make it seem exactly like how you're going to do it on the exam. Okay, and so for CARS passages, I want to go over just a quick framework that we can use to better our understanding of the passages that we'll be coming across. So we have the CARS section, and you can break the passages that you see into two broad categories. So you can have persuasive, and informative. And even within these persuasive passages, we can break it down a little bit further. So usually the author is trying to convince you of something, and they can be trying to convince you that it's good, that it's neutral, or bad. And so, of course, there is going to be a much more nuance to this in the questions and answers, but being able to break it down into these broader categories can help you just eliminate some answer choices right off the bat. And so it's helpful to, especially when the things that you see may be very complicated, it's helpful to simplify it a little bit more into kind of these buckets that you can pull from when you are trying to answer the questions. All right, and so you can also break it down into the passage being focused around one main point or multiple points. And even within these multiple points, sometimes all the points will be aligning, and they all kind of build together towards this one larger point, or they can be competing. And the MCAT loves to put in these competing viewpoints. They love to kind of, I'm sure you've noticed, throw in something contradictory at the end there and see how you handle it. But by having this framework in mind, and really getting a grasp of how does the author feel towards the existing viewpoint, how does this fit into that? Are these 2 points in conjunction with each other? Are they opposing each other? Being able to kind of organize it in your head like that will really help you when you're going on to answer the questions. And so this is kind of just something that you can use to harken back to when you are answering the questions. And again, it just helps to simplify the content matter a little bit further. So I want to go over the methodology that I'll be using today, and something that I've used when I answer CARS passages, and I found that helps me. So the first thing that I do is I always just read the passage to the fullest. I don't scan it because I feel like sometimes you can be really focused and obsessed with the fact that you're scanning it and lose sight of what you're really there to do, which is understand the passage. So I read the passage to the fullest. I take the amount of time that I need within a reasonable extent. And then at the end of each paragraph, sometimes I'll make an outline. And so that's just a couple words to summarize what I just read and keep me on track and keep me grounded. And we'll be doing that today as well. If by the time you take your exam, you're able to do that in your head, that's great. But again, just do whatever saves you the most time and gets you to the right answer. And then at the end of the passage, we can derive our main idea. And so that's just going to be a quick 1-sentence summary of what it is the passage was focused around, and what are, going back to the framework that we built, how does the author feel? Do they feel good about this? Are there multiple points that we need to be taking into consideration? Kind of summarize all that at the end. And so then moving on to answering the questions, I like to just go through and answer the questions, put down an answer, whether that's using text evidence, some, reasoning beyond the text, or process of elimination. Even if it's just your gut feeling or your best guess, just circle an answer and move on. And once we've answered everything, that's when we can come back, we can scan the passage, and use our highlighting skills, go back to those questions where we had a little bit of trouble on, we didn't know the answer right off the bat. And use our highlighting. Maybe you think, oh, I remember I saw that in paragraph 3, reread it. Do a little bit of a deeper dive to finalize our answer, and then we can move on. So I think that's all pretty typical of what you may see in terms of advice for going through a CARS passage. Couple things that I like to focus on, specifically, first thing is the tone. So the author, they are a writer, they did write this, but they're also a human who feels a certain type of way towards the content in the passage, and they definitely express that in their own unique sense. And so I like to really pick up on those humanistic qualities and nuances that the author is using, really just bringing it back to the tone of how they feel towards the topic. And then I'll also simplify. So like I said earlier, everything that we read is going to be super complicated, and we really don't want to make it harder for ourselves. So the most that we can do to simplify it and break it down into bite-sized chunks is going to be perfect for us. All right, great. So with that being said, I'm going to move into the actual passage. And I'll be highlighting things that stand out to me. I'll try to explain why I highlight those things, and then I'll also be reading it out loud so you can follow along at home. But okay, let's get started. Most men, even in this comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake, are so occupied with the fictitious cares and superfluously coarse labors of life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them. Their fingers, from excessive toil, are too clumsy and tremble too much for that. He has no time to be anything but a machine. How can he remember well his ignorance, which his growth requires, who has so often to use his knowledge? We should feed and clothe him gratuitously sometimes, and recruit him with our cordials before we judge of him. The finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be preserved only by the most delicate handling. Yet we do not treat ourselves, nor one another, thus tenderly. Okay, so at this point, take 5 to 10 seconds to kind of summarize what you thought was the main idea of this paragraph. All right, so the things that I highlighted, coarse labors of life, that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them, and the finest qualities can be preserved only by the most delicate handling. I felt like these were statements, they use the word only and cannot, like they're very definitive sentences that I feel kind of expose what the author feels about the main topic here. But the main idea for this paragraph, I would say, are just that, these coarse labors, finer fruits, maybe that hard work, again, just very easy, simple terms, hard work prevents enjoyment. And I'm trying to still use language that's similar to what they said in the passage, just because that kind of helps me bring it back to the main idea, and it grounds me to, again, like what the author might be saying and how they feel towards this. So just very simply put, hard work prevents enjoyment. All right, let's keep moving. Some of you, we all know, are poor, find it hard to live, are sometimes, as it were, gasping for breath. I have no doubt that some of you who read this book are unable to pay for all the dinners which you have actually eaten, or for the coats and shoes which are fast wearing or already worn out, and have come to this page to spend borrowed or stolen time, robbing your creditors of an hour. All right. So based off of this, again, doesn't really seem to be adding too much to the argument, but if I had to summarize it, I think I would say they're poor, gasping for breath, they can't pay, creditors. It's kind of, this seems like he's like hinting towards debt. So maybe just simply put, men are in debt. Okay, I'm not sure how salient that even is right now, and of course some of these words are, the phrasing is kind of like old English, it's hard to understand off the bat, but we're going to do our best, we're going to keep reading, we're going to summarize it to the best extent as we can to save as much time and keep moving. Okay. It is very evident what mean and sneaking lives many of you live, for my sight has been whetted by experience. Always on the limits, trying to get into business and trying to get out of debt, okay? A very ancient sloth, another's brass, for some of their coins were made of brass. Still living and dying and buried by this other's brass, always promising to pay, tomorrow and dying today, insolvent, seeking to curry favor, to get custom, by how many modes, only not state prison offenses, lying, flattering, voting, contracting yourselves into a nutshell of civility, or dilating into an atmosphere of thin and vaporous generosity, that you may persuade your neighbor to let you make his shoes, or his hat, or his coat, or his carriage, or import his groceries for him, making yourself sick, that you may lay up something against a sick day, something to be tucked away in an old chest, or in a stocking behind the plastering, or more safely in the brick bank, no matter where, no matter how much or how little. Okay, very interesting. So something I want to point out here is that even though this paragraph was kind of long, it's like a pretty sizable paragraph compared to the other ones, let's look into how much is actually said. I think when people see a paragraph this big, they think that so many points must have been made and the author is really hearkening to the main point here, but really a lot of this is like kind of fluffy wording, right? So it seems like what the author does is like they make a lot of like smaller sentences that they split using commas or semicolons, and they use a lot of like examples. So always like still living and dying and buried by these others brass, promising to pay tomorrow, insolvent, and just like all these like examples here, state prisons, lying, flattering, voting, like his shoes, his coat, his carriage, groceries, making yourself sick. So just all of these, it's just like, it's all just examples that seem to be reinforcing the main idea. And the examples really start early on, right? They start like pretty much in the second sentence right here, and they go on up until the end, and all that is just fluff, but it's trying to reinforce a main point, right? So let's try to figure out what is that main point that it's trying to reinforce. And I would assume that it's probably, a point that's probably made in the first sentence, like sentence and a half right here. So let's reread that again. It's very evident what mean and sneaking lives many of you live, for my sight has been whetted by experience, always on the limits, trying to get into business and trying to get out of debt, a very ancient sloth. Okay, so I think since we already did make that point about debt earlier, it seems to be a recurring theme throughout the passage, and it seems to be something that the author is really trying to emphasize. So for the second paragraph here, I would probably just, again, simplify and say, men struggling with debt. Men struggling with debt. And, that's really reinforced here by just all the examples that he's giving here, by how these men are trying to get out of debt and how they're trying to pay it back, and just the hard work that they're putting in to break even financially, and with just like the ways that they're living. So that seems to be kind of a theme that I'm pulling just so far. Seems to be like, hard work, financial struggles, and that kind of getting in the way of being happy. So those are just my initial thoughts so far. Let's keep reading and see if there's, maybe another contracting viewpoint, if there's another viewpoint that the author is going to try and get us to see. Okay, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country and have to console yourselves with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotyped but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. Concealed even under. Okay. There's no play in them, for this comes after work. No play. Okay, work. But it is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. Okay. So, again, we saw some of the same words that we've seen earlier. So, no play, hard work, the mass of men, desperation. So, just like the words that this author is using just keeps hearkening to this like really dark theme of men seeming to not be able to enjoy themselves. But I really want to focus on this last sentence here, where the author starts with a but. And I've always found that when authors start sentences with a but, they're about to introduce either like a solution to the problem that they've been talking about, or resolution to the argument, or maybe even a contracting point. So let's read this again. But it is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. So this word wisdom really is kind of jumping out at me. We haven't really seen a word that has that general tone of like intelligence, wisdom, like something with a good tone earlier on the passage. So I think that the main idea of this passage is probably going to be something related to that last sentence, and connecting that to desperation. So I would probably say something along the lines of desperation does not equal wise. And I can use little characters like this. I love using characters, kind of breaking it down into an equation format. I think that really helps me understand the passage that much better. So desperation does not equal wise, and I'll honestly go even far to say but desperation does equal work. Okay. And again, I'm not exactly sure what a lot of these like exact terms mean, like bravery of minks and muskrats, but let's not get convoluted in the nuances of this. Let's just very, broad picture, trying to understand what the author is saying and drawing it back to some sort of main idea. Okay, let's keep going. The whole ground of human life seems to some to have been gone over by their predecessors. Okay. Both the heights and the valleys and all things to have been cared for. According to Evelyn, and so this looks like an example, according to Evelyn, the wise Solomon prescribed ordinances for the very distances of trees, and the Romans have decided how often you may go into your neighbor's land to gather the acorns which fall on it without trespass, and what share belongs to that neighbor. Hippocrates has even left directions how we should cut our nails. Again, this looks like another example. That is, even with the ends of the fingers, neither shorter nor longer. Undoubtedly, the very tedium and ennui which presume to have exhausted, because that kind of reminds me of terms we used earlier on, exhausted the variety and the joys of life are as old as Adam. But man's capacities have never been measured, nor are we to judge of what he can do by any precedents, so little has been tried. Whatever have been thy failures hitherto, be not afflicted, my child, for who shall assign to thee what thou hast left undone? Okay, and this last paragraph for me really just hit home the idea that this paragraph uses very old styles of English and styles of writing, and so the MCAT, I'm sure, knows that it's complicated, and they know that we're going to have trouble answering it, so don't get, again, too into the weeds with what exactly is it that the author is trying to say. Let's focus on the main idea. And the main idea of this paragraph, I feel like, was a little different from the other paragraphs. They kind of introduced this concept of predecessors. And again, even though it was like a longish paragraph, a lot of the paragraph was just examples. So an example here with Evelyn, an example here with Hippocrates, and kind of bringing in Adam. But for me, I really found that the main idea was stated mostly at the end with, again, this but statement. So, but man's capacities have never been measured, nor are we to judge of what he can do by any precedents, so little has been tried. And so it seems like what the author is saying is that a lot of this struggle that comes with hard work and maybe the pain and the lack of joy that man is feeling, that he mentioned earlier on, might be due to this concept of predecessors telling us what to do. And so if I had to get a main idea from this, I would probably say something like predecessors are limiting. And like just a comma, not good. just so we can bring it back to simple terms, like predecessors in general, their vibes, what they're saying, not good, not helping men be happy. And so that's probably kind of just like the main idea that I would take from that. But we are at the end of the passage, so now we can draw a larger main idea, and we can use our framework that we wrote earlier on. And so I would say this is a persuasive passage for sure. Is the author feeling good, neutral, or bad towards the main idea? So the main idea, or the main topic that they were discussing, I think, was hard work and kind of just like slogging away for money and really toiling yourself. And I think the author does feel not the best towards that. Hard work is bad. And are there multiple viewpoints? Is there kind of a solution that the author is presenting? I would say, yeah, towards the end of the passage, especially in that last paragraph, the author brings up the idea that this hard work, this grind culture kind of might have been inspired by their predecessors, right? Wow, like this seems almost so similar to what we hear every day now. Like this grind culture is just not good for us, and it's set by people who believed in that maybe years and years ago, but it's best for us to kind of take a step back and chill out a little. So maybe hard work is bad. Like we can solve it by don't listen to predecessors. Okay. So again, this is very surface level, and like I don't have like a perfect understanding of everything that who wrote this. Thoreau, of course. I don't have an understanding of everything Thoreau wrote about or described, but that's okay, because all we need to do now is move on to the questions. We're going to do our best to answer the questions, and then of course if we need to go back and clarify anything, we can do that. But for the interest of time on the MCAT, always try to keep moving forward. Okay, so question 1. According to the first paragraph of the passage, great. So I love when they do these references. First paragraph of the passage, the author implies that, okay, A, ignorance and mistake are unavoidable. B, the people in the country of discussion have a chance to enjoy finer aspects of life. C, only free countries can enjoy the finer fruits of life. And D, hard work prevents all enjoyment. Okay, and so I highlighted this part in the question about the first paragraph because I love when the questions tell you exactly where the answer is, because that's what they're doing. They're telling you the answer is somewhere in these few sentences. And so before I go and read it, I obviously want to try and just see if I can cross anything out off the bat. And so A, ignorance and mistake are unavoidable. Based off of what we read, and just in general, words like unavoidable are very like concrete. Okay, there's no room for leeway there. And for any sort of question on the MCAT, you want to try and stray away from things that are like always, never, or things that, again, like kind of those words that leave no room for leeway. And so unavoidable, I feel like that's not gonna be one of the the correct answer, because even in the first paragraph, it says through mere ignorance and mistakes. So they are using that verbiage. And it's saying that most men, even in this comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake, are so occupied with the fictitious cares and superfluously coarse labors of life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them. And so it seems like these finer fruits are being blocked by ignorance and mistake. If we look to our highlighting, what did we highlight? The finest qualities can be preserved only by the most delicate handling. So it looks like these fine qualities can be achieved if they can, and again using the word ignorance, which his growth requires, if they can use his knowledge. So there seems to be workarounds to this concept of ignorance and mistake. It doesn't seem to be something that is unavoidable. The author is presenting a solution. So I'm going to cross out A because that doesn't look like that's the answer. Okay, B. The people in the country of discussion have a chance to enjoy finer aspects of life. Okay, that does seem like more what we read, because the author did produce a solution. They did offer us kind of like, if we have like this delicate handling, we can enjoy the finer fruits. If they, there is this excessive toil that's kind of holding them back, so there's something holding them back, they do have a chance to enjoy these finer aspects of life. So that does seem like an answer. I won't cross it out yet, but we'll read the rest. Okay. C, only free countries can enjoy the finer fruits of life. Again, there's this word only. Always take pause when you see words like that. Again, the only, never, always, things that leave no room for leeway. Does it say in this first paragraph that anywhere that you have to be in a free country to enjoy finer fruits of life? What it does say is that in this comparatively free country, they are not able to enjoy the finer fruits of life, but it doesn't say that you have to be in a free country to do so. So because of that, we can cross out C. Okay, D, hard work prevents all enjoyment. But let's see. Again, you have that word all there. I'm not sure, if that's gonna be something that's the right answer, because it does say that hard work, prevents enjoyment, it's holding them back, but is it saying that the two are mutually exclusive, in that if you do work hard, you're going to not be able to enjoy anything at all? Let's see. It says that the finest qualities of our nature, like bloom on fruits, can be preserved by the most delicate handling. Okay. Are so occupied with the fictitious cares and superfluously coarse labors of life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them. Their fingers from excessive toil are too clumsy. They have no time to be anything but a machine. And so while I think the first paragraph is trying to get to these tones of, working hard and really toiling and grueling yourself can get in the way of enjoying life, I don't think that the author is anywhere at any point explicitly saying that hard work is going to stop you from enjoying at all. All enjoyment is going to be gone. There's not going to be any chance for it. And if we are between B and D, let's just look at what we have the most text evidence for, right? That's always a good strategy to use if you're between two choices. Which strategy is going to be more supported by what the first paragraph is saying? And so going back to B, the people in the country of discussion have a chance to enjoy the finer aspects of life. That is said pretty much explicitly, right? They say they do have the chance. The finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be preserved only by the most delicate handling, yet we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly. And they're saying that through this excessive toil, they're unable to do that, but they do have the chance if they were to delicately handle each other, and they don't do it. They don't treat each other thus tenderly to be able to enjoy those finer aspects. And so I would say that the answer here is B, because while it doesn't explicitly say anywhere that hard work is preventing all enjoyment, it does say that these people in this country can be doing things differently to enjoy those finer aspects of life. Okay. So question 2, suppose an individual who owes a shoemaker money for shoes is currently reading the passage. The author would most likely respond by saying, okay, so a shoemaker owing money, that sounds like a debt. We did talk about debt, and that was actually, I think somewhere here, in paragraph 2, and they even use this word like currently reading the passage, and he says, I have no doubt that some of you who read this book. Okay, so now that we know where in the passage it is, it's hard to remember exactly what they said, so what I'll do is just reread that sentence really quickly. So I have no doubt that some of you who read this book are unable to pay for all the dinners which you have actually eaten, and have come to this page to spend borrowed time or stolen time robbing your creditors of an hour. So again, I like to pick up on the tone that the author is using. They're saying spend borrowed, stolen time, robbing your creditors of an hour. It doesn't seem like Thoreau looks very favorably down upon these people who are maybe reading this instead of working to pay their creditors back, right? I think he feels like they're probably committing a crime. They're stealing time from their creditors. And so before I go into the answer choices, I am predicting that I'm going to be looking for something that indicates that the person who's reading this is doing something wrong, and they're stealing their creditors of time, and they should be figuring out a way to right that wrong. And so as I go into the answer choices, A, the individual has the right to read the passage. That seems more like it's a good feeling towards the individual, which Thoreau doesn't seem like they have, since he's saying that they're robbing their creditors of an hour. So I'm going to cross that out. B, the individual should be repaying the shoemaker instead of reading the passage. Yeah, I mean, that kind of gets to what Thoreau was saying, right? They're saying that he was saying that the reader is robbing their creditors of an hour, so indicating that maybe they should abandon everything that they're doing and work first towards giving their creditors back that hour. So I'm not going to cross that out, but I'm not going to choose it immediately. Let's read the rest of the choices. C, the individual should finish reading the passage and then repay the shoemaker. Well, it does get to this point of repaying the shoemaker, but letting them finish read the passage doesn't really seem like something Thoreau is encouraging here. He's saying that, they're spending borrowed or stolen time. Like, the time that they're spending to read this passage isn't even theirs. So that kind of indicates that Thoreau would probably prefer that they go immediately to repay their creditor and not finish reading it. It doesn't seem like he's saying, oh, you should finish reading this and then go. So I can cross this out. D, the individual was robbed by the shoemaker. So something that the MCAT will do is that they'll actually throw in words from the passage exactly like they said. They said robbed here and they said robbed here, and they are hoping that you'll kind of just see that word, tunnel vision on that word, and then choose the answer without really understanding it in the larger context. But here they're saying the individual was robbed by the shoemaker, which is exactly opposite to what it says in the passage, where the reader is robbing their creditors. So that is the exact opposite of the answer, so we can cross that out, leaving B to be our correct answer. Okay, and question 3, the author mentions Hippocrates in the final paragraph in order to. Okay, and so I don't remember, I'm reading this question, and I don't remember exactly why Hippocrates was mentioned or in what context or what Hippocrates said. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in my highlighting to see if I circled anything with Hippocrates and where exactly in the passage there was, just to kind of center myself and get a feel for the context of this. So Hippocrates, I think it was in this paragraph, and I did circle it here. So, I remember I said Hippocrates here was used more as an example, right? The main paragraph of this, the main idea of this paragraph, we said was this first sentence here, right? We said that this is kind of, they mentioned everything about predecessors that they needed to there, and the rest of it was examples. Evelyn was an example, Hippocrates was an example, Adam was an example, and then they got back to this concept of predecessors here at the end. So now I've centered myself. I remember, okay, Hippocrates was an example of a predecessor telling them what to do. Now that I've kind of have an idea for what I think the answer choice should be, I'm going to go back to the question, and I'm going to look for answer choices that reinforce that. All right, so A, serve as an example for human shortcomings. Okay, so we have that idea, that concept of example, but for human shortcomings, is that exactly what Thoreau was saying? Because I remember we said that he was talking about predecessors. So while this part's not really making sense to me, I don't want to cross it out just yet, since we did get this word, this example. So I'll keep it for now. B, provide concrete instructions for self-care. All right, so all parts of that is unrelated to what we were talking about. It's not, it's an example of a predecessor, but it's not, there's no aspect of self care, right? They're just kind of giving an example of someone in the past who told people now what to do. So I'm going to cross that out. C, give an example of the wide range of instructions left by predecessors. Okay, so again, I do like that they use the word example here, and I really do like that they use the word predecessor here, because that kind of gets closer to what we were expecting, right? The main idea of that paragraph was this concept of predecessors. So that does seem like it's on the right path. I'm gonna leave it for now. And then D, contradict Evelyn's statement. So when we were reading that paragraph, we said that Hippocrates, Evelyn, Adam, these were all examples. They're all different views that kind of align with each other. And again, using that framework, right? Even within this one paragraph, they were giving like these multiple examples that are all aligning with each other. So I don't think that they were contradictory. So between these two choices, A and C, they both do correctly identify Hippocrates as an example, but were they using Hippocrates as an example for human shortcomings or as an example for a predecessor? And from what we gleaned earlier on, they were using Hippocrates as an example for a predecessor. So we can circle C and cross out A. All right, final question. In order to describe how humans should treat one another, the author uses an analogy to, okay, A, fruits, B, coats, C, shoes, D, nails. Okay, and so this verbiage of how humans should treat one another, that I feel like I remember that earlier on in the passage, kind of in the very first paragraph. I feel like I remember reading that. Yeah, here we go. So here's the word treat. Yet we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly. So now that I've centered myself and kind of where this question is pulling from in the passage, I'm gonna try and like read around it to build context and help me answer the question. And that's something that I like to do, and I think it's really helpful to kind of get that context if you've found where you are in the passage. All right, so just reading the sentence before that, the finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be preserved only by the most delicate handling. So the bloom on fruits are these finest qualities of nature, and you know that because they use this word like. Can be preserved only by the most delicate handling, yet we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly. Okay, so that seems to be exactly what the question is asking here. They're asking about how humans should treat one another. And I guess we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly is kind of referring to how we preserve these finest qualities. And again, these finest qualities we indicated earlier on are like the bloom on fruits. So the best choice here, I would say, is fruits. And I don't remember reading anything about, this idea of coats, if we just have a little extra time to confirm that fruits is the right answer. Coats was mentioned somewhere here in the third paragraph by his coat. I don't think that's just an example for something that they're saying on how people use to repay their debts. So that's not how we're treating each other. Shoes, again, that's another example right next to coats. It's all in the same area, so they probably mean the same thing. Again, it's just an example for how people are repaying their debts. And then nails. I actually don't even remember reading nails anywhere in the passage. And even if it was in there, if I don't necessarily remember it, it must have been a throwaway example or something unrelated. But either way, fruits has the most text evidence. It makes the most sense. And so it would appear that fruits is the right answer for this question. All right. And that's the whole passage. I hope that was clear in how I went through it. This is kind of how my brain works when I do a CARS passage, and hopefully you were able to glean some helpful strategies from this video. But if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Shemmassian Academic Consulting videos. We have a lot more MCAT passage walkthroughs on all the subjects, and we do have a 528 series with videos on how to ace the MCAT and use those study strategies to do your best on exam day. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and good luck, and have a great rest of your day.